I don't know if you noticed they had Robesi Ramirez, 126-pounder on the co-main event. Um, obviously Inoue is going to be able to try to get those other two straps from the Filipino dude to become undisputed at 122. But it seems to me they're trying to warm up a Robesi Ramirez and Inoue fight. How do you see that
You
fight
know,
playing
man,
out if it was
I'm a
to
big
happen?
Inoue fan. I think he's a great fighter, Hall of Fame fighter. He's probably gonna go down in history as the top 5 or 6 bantamweight of all time. He might be the best Japanese fighter of all time. You know, but along with fighting Harada. But Robeisy Ramirez is a tough fight because that's another weight division. Eventually, you run into a wall. We don't know what it's going to be, but eventually, you run into a wall. He's a southpaw. He's a little bigger. He got amazing pedigree. You don't get that kind of pedigree by accident, even though he, took a loss as a pro. You don't win 2 gold medals by accident. So yeah, let's
And
just
he's
see.
cracking.
You know what I mean? Let's just see. You got to just see. These is fights. I'm not one of them people that's going to say in the week of fight tank and move up to 35, 40. You got to have a limit. What Pacquiao did, that's an outlier. Like, we never going to see that again. A guy come from um, flyweight to be the best welterweight in the world and then fight guys at junior middleweight. That don't happen. You know what I mean? So let's just see. 22. He looks great at 122. I'm not saying he can't fight at 126, but let's not put. Let's let's just see it on a fight by fight basis. Because I don't. If he starts blowing guys out like that at 126 and 130, then we gotta start looking and say this is the best fighter we ever seen in our life. You know what I mean? Like at a certain point, like you know what I mean? Like we just gotta just see. You know what I mean? I don't want to get too crazy with it. You know what I mean? He probably will be the favorite over the guys at 126, but I gotta see. You know what I mean? Like that's a tough fight. I don't believe he will blow Robeisy Ramirez out like that. But who knows? I didn't think he would do that to Scooter, man. I never seen nobody get the better of Scooter like that ever. Um, Gotta get a guy's props, man. That was shocking to me.
Absolutely. And I like that you mentioned, let's not get a hold of ourselves and start talking about a tank fight for a mega fight down the line because it's a lot
Tank,
of weight.
Tank
It
may
is a
not
lot of
be a
weight,
big
but at the
35
same time,
pounder,
some of these
but he's big to um in a way. You know what I mean? Like any cracking, that's like what sometimes, people like they need to see you lose to justify their eyes. And there's always somebody that could beat somebody. You never gonna hear me talk in those kind of terms, like thinking that like nobody could lose. Anybody could lose. Roy Jones and Ray Leonard, the best fighters of my lifetime that I seen with my eyes, and they lost. You know what I mean? Anybody could lose on any given day. You're not having your day. If you move up enough or you fight enough tough guys that's in their primes, and sometimes somebody just will have your number. Like, okay, all right, he just had like Tarver had Jones' number. You know what I mean? Like it can happen. So, you know, um, asking him to fight Tank is, that's sort of the equivalent of, maybe asking Tank to fight Charlo at 54 or Earl at 47. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you know, it's not a pound for pound thing anymore. It's a literal thing. Like, you literally got to go in the ring and fight that guy. We're not imagining who would be better if everybody was the same size because they getting in the ring with each other. So, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's fair to in a way. I got to see how he is in the weight divisions and, moving up. But right now, he's a bad dude, man. And he got a real good argument for the best fighter in the world. And if he was 147 pounds, with a 20-0 record in title fights, being this dominant in fights where nobody has ever really had a claim to beating him, and he's dominating the way he is, then it probably wouldn't be much of a question on who's the best pound for pound fighter in the world. But because he's smaller and the media isn't familiar with his opponents like that, you know, sometimes the smaller guys get overlooked slightly. Happened with Chocolatito a few years back. But that's a great fighter, bro. That's a great fighter. I know a great fighter when I see one. That's a great fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, you know, like it's not necessarily impossible due to the fact that some of those smaller weight classes are so close to each other. They start separating between 2 to 4 pounds versus the middleweight classes. You start to see, you know,
You're
an 8 pound
right.
difference
That's
coming up.
why. That's why I
So
said what I said. You're 100% right. Like, um, I don't minimize jumping in weight when you're a smaller guy, but honestly, it's, you know, it's easier to go from 112 to 115 because the field of fighters is not as big and the weight divisions is not as many pounds that separate them. So it just is, you know, and I'm not diminishing anything that the little guys do, but when you look at who jump what weight divisions, you can see fighters that don't necessarily have to be as great to go through the smaller weight divisions, but are at around 140, that stops. You know, around 140, if you're a 40-pound champion, you got to be pretty darn good to win the title at 50, 47. 47-pound champions. I
yeah,
want you to think about this, bro. In this era, none of the champions from 47 have won titles at 54. None of them.
yeah.
Think
It's
think
a
about
different
all of the
it's a different
champions.
animal.
All of the champions at 147 pounds over the last 10 years have not won a title at 154 pounds. Not one. I know this for a fact. I don't even have to look it up in Google or anything. Not one of them have done it. The last fighters who have done that was the Floyds, the Mannies,
Floyd.
the Cottos, Oscars, but they from a different era.
Damn,
Yeah,
it's been 10 years already. It's
yo,
been
but
10
and
years
they're
already.
from a
It's
different era.
crazy.
They're not even from these guys' era. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? They're like Floyd Manny and them. They like almost 50 now. They're not. They just fought a long time, but they're not even from this era. Cotto, he's not from this era. He turned pro in 2000. Some of these guys wasn't born when he turned pro. So they're not even from this era. But the guys from this era, the guys who turned pro after 2000, none of them have done it. You know what I mean? So the weight jumping changes. That's why I never like talk about like the middleweights who don't jump the light heavyweight. That's a big ass jump. You know what I mean? Their bodies can't handle that. You know what I mean? So it's a little different. So um uh it's just different. Once you get around 140, 147, that weight jumping stops. You don't do it as much. You know, but again, dude's still a special fighter, man. That was it was heartbreaking to see, but at the same time, you gotta give this guy props.
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the intel, man. You had me thinking there for a while. I
I
was like,
won.
yeah, man, you're
I
right. It's
won.
been 10
There's
years
been a
now.
couple of guys
Yeah.
from 54 that won titles at 60. Um,
Like there's been guys that have been 47, but they didn't win titles at 47 to
yeah,
go up to
no,
54.
I'm telling you,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
telling you,
yeah, yeah.
the jump,
They just
it
started their
stops around
career.
that
Yeah.
weight. They get a little bit more careful and selective, man, because the body frames and everything changes, man. It stops. It's not too many guys at 60 that win titles at 68. The body frames change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Canelo, special fighter. Special fighter. He's the only one that, huh?
Still not from this era. Really,
Yeah,
still
he's hanging
still not
on in
really
this
from this
era. He's
era
like a
either.
tweener, but that's a special fighter. You know what I mean? That's a
Yeah.
special fighter. I mean, Billy Joe Sanders did it. I don't consider him a special fighter. You know what I mean? Maybe, you know, he slipped through the cracks and did it, but Canelo did it. It's just a rare thing that stuff stop when you get to a certain weight. You gotta be you gotta be really, really special to do that once you get above around 140, 147.
Mm, mm. Absolutely, I definitely agree. Before I leave though, imagine though a Tank and Inoue fight. Like really, just think about it.
It
How
would be a
big would
huge
it be?
fight, but I don't want to imagine too much, man, because I just feel like that's a lot of weight for Inoue to give up and a lot of physicality to give up. And we know he a monster at 122. Nobody's gonna argue that. But being a monster at 135 is just a difference. You know, like it just is. Like only two men in history have had success at 135 that fought at 122 in the whole history of boxing. It's just hard. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, three men in history. Tony Canzoneri, it was no 122 when he fought, but he was a bantamweight. Manny Pacquiao and Eric Morales. That's it. And all these years of boxing, bro.
Eric
These is
Morales.
just not easy things that we kind of take for granted. I know guys do it a little, try to do it a little bit more because they, you know, with the 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 new modern science where you could cut massive amounts of water weight and stuff like that. But man, I don't know how that guy's gonna hold up at 26 and 30 and then 35. I mean, Nolito Daenerys broke his face at 118. You know what I mean? So I don't know if he could. That's just a lot to deal with. That's a lot to ask him. You know, and right now he might be the best fighter in the world, but that don't mean he could beat Tank at 135. You know, I don't know. I know what everybody's trying to do, but that's a lot to ask, man. You know, when Manny did that with Oscar, that's one guy. You know what I mean? And we don't know if he now. I mean, he looks to be as good as Manny, but Manny didn't stop at 122. He kept going. You know what I mean? So it's tough, man.